everyone, and welcome to episode 717 of Longbox Heroes, the Lamborghini of comic book podcasts. Joe and Todd here. Todd, hello. How are you?
I'm doing great. Ready to do a show?
Yes. We spoke off mic several times that this is going to be a short show, and it might be.
I hope so.
I don't know. We'll see. Todd's got to get to bed.
I do. I'm all tuckered out.
I was in bed, covers up, out like a light before 9:30 on Monday.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a late Friday. No, it was a late Saturday. It was a late Sunday, a lot of wrestling. And then it just had run me out. And then Monday I was, watching the boys as I do late at night, and I'm sitting here watching. I just couldn't keep my eyes open. I'm like, this is not, the boys deserves my undivided attention if I'm going to watch it. So I'm just going to pause it. If I go to bed now, I'll be up early and I could watch it early tomorrow, and then we'll be good to go. And we were.
Right. I'm usually up until 3 a.m. watching whatever I have to for the show. So,
you know what it was? What also button hooked me this week as well? Late night Saturday wrestling, late night Sunday wrestling, and then and I didn't even put the pieces together yesterday when I was dead tired at 9 o'clock.
Right.
I also mowed the lawn on Monday.
Oh, look at you getting all that exercise.
It's just too much all at once, right?
You know what, Joe? I've slept for the both of us then, so.
Perfect.
Good.
All right, so this week on the show in news, we have the return of a certain character whose origin was that he was bitten by a radioactive moon. Mm-hmm. We have the return of a writer whose origin is not that he was bitten by a radioactive moon, but maybe he'll be writing the adventures of someone who was bitten by a radioactive spider. Mm-hmm. And how much is a commission by one of the most famous artists of the last 33 years worth to you?
It's a specific number of years.
Very specific number. And I don't know. Shout out to Mike in the Discord. Maybe we'll tease a little this day in comic book history, only because this is a very big day in comic book history. How about that?
Yeah, that's fair enough.
All right. Conventions this weekend, of course. Beckie is going to take a little bit of a detour. It still involves Lois Lane, but she's going to talk about one of my favorite aspects in the world of comics in my walk down Lois Lane, what we read from this past week, which is Absolute Power Ground Zero #1 and Thanos Annual #1. What we're looking forward to coming out this week. No Todd's Art Attack, but we do have Todd and Joe Have Issues, as we will be discussing Gail Simone's Secret 6 issue 10, which is the beginning of a new story arc, and discussion of the latest episodes of Star Wars The Acolyte and Boys Season 4.
Pack show.
Did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
I know we alternate week to week, but sometimes I feel as though like I forgot something.
I know I've forgotten things more than once, so.
Mm-hmm. So, this past week, Marvel, through Random House, decided to send a 0 issue of the upcoming Moon Knight series to retailers with their orders. Now, we didn't even know a Moon Knight book was coming out. Apparently it's coming out in October. It ties into whatever's going on in Blood Hunt. And it was a special limited edition variant. I know our local retailer didn't even know this was a thing until Wednesday morning at 10:01. They were getting phone calls from people saying, "Do you have Moon Knight 0 with the variant cover?" And they were very confused by this.
Right. Did they end up having it, though?
They had one.
Right. Like, that's what I was thinking, because I was wondering if they got skipped or because...
Nope. They got one, but they didn't even know because they didn't even go through all their Marvel stuff yet, because it was, first thing in the morning on a Wednesday, right?
Right. Wasn't unpacked.
Right. And... then obviously came through on Diamond, and there was a whole press release that came with it and so forth, that you're going to be able to start, or you were able to order issue zeros if you wanted them, but it wouldn't be with that variant cover.
Right, it'd be the regular cover for it.
Yeah. And again, it's E.M. Geist, who I guess is a big deal artist. Who's the writer of it is Jed MacKay, I think, who was doing the previous Moon Knight story where they had and again, spoilers everyone for Moon Knight. This is the return of Mark Spector as the Moon Knight.
Oh wow.
Right. So, that's part of the reason why it will be a hot book. New costume, new look, new everything, whatever. Again, just an interesting way for Marvel to go about getting that out to folks,
Right. I'm a big fan anytime a company sends something that's like free to a retailer, brick and mortar especially, that can, like, it's a one of how many variant, and this is polybag zero issue that's going to be different, like that they could just turn around and like sell that and make a ton of money. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's just something, it's a nice, chunk of change for the shop. And I love being in my like groups that I do like for prices and stuff. And they complain about when a book like rockets up. And I understand if somebody complains about a book that's like, oh, this is just issue 18 regular cover and retailers are selling it for $80, and your regular customers can't get if they ordered it or whatever. But people complaining about like a 1 of 300 variant cover and the retailer's like, well, I'm going to get some money for this. What should they sell it for, cover price? Like, you're out of your mind. Make that money, put it towards your rent, and sell me comics. That's the way I look at it.
Right. So again, just to clarify, E.M. Geist regular cover, the surprise variant by Alessandro Capicoio.
Yeah, I know it, but I have to look at it.
So again, retailers got the one last week. Friday, they were able to order more to arrive this week of the issue 0. Again, not in the solicitations, not whatever. But if you're a Moon Knight person, hey, Moon Knight's back. Mark Spector's back. Maybe it's the Moon Knight you love, right?
Right.
So go check it out.
I agree.
Last week, we had discussed Zeb Wells specifically as the writer, John Romita Jr. as the most of the time artist on Amazing Spider-Man, and then speculation as to who the new writer on Amazing Spider-Man was going to be. Well, apparently on that Moon Knight 0 that went out to folks, there's also information on there that says plus a brand new era of Amazing Spider-Man from writer Joe Kelly begins here.
Hey, I know that guy.
Hey, I know that guy too. I like Joe Kelly quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And they just recently, and I say recently, like earlier this year, Marvel put out an omnibus of Joe Kelly's Spider-Man work, all collected in one spot, which does sweep across a lot of things. In the issue 50 of Amazing Spider-Man that came out a couple months ago, Joe Kelly did a little story in that as well. I'm going to go out on a limb here. Like I said, I want to preface this and say I like Joe Kelly a lot. I pick up almost everything that he does. I haven't loved a lot of his Amazing Spider-Man.
Really?
It's been just okay.
Huh. I'm kind of shocked because, I know you're a big fan of his.
Yeah, I am. And he, like I said, he did stuff. He was one of the on-again, off-again writers during Brand New Day. Then he got like a bunch of like story arcs during that time. He did a couple mini-series as this is that were plagued by delays and plagued by the pandemic and stuff. That were out of the Amazing Spider-Man continuity, which we talked about last week. Maybe that like Amazing Spider-Man is like the main continuity stuff, and then all the other Spider-Man books kind of exist in their own separate continuity, and they only intertwine when they need to expand a story that's going on in Amazing Spider-Man, which doesn't happen very often. Like, just as an example, the Spider-Verse stuff that's real hot because of the Spider-Verse movies,
mm-hmm.
rarely, if at all, ever gets mentioned in Amazing Spider-Man. But all the other ancillary Spider-Man books are steeped in multiverses of multi-Spider-Man.
Okay.
I'm gonna get Amazing Spider-Man regardless, and I'm hoping that this time around the Joe Kelly mainline stuff hits for me because it's mainline. I got my fingers crossed.
See, when I saw this, I thought, maybe you'd be really excited, but apparently you're not super excited for it. I saw it and I was like, well, this is just another run of Spider-Man. I'm probably not going to pick up because I don't really think there was a lot of Joe Kelly stuff that I was like, oh my God, I really read, because I don't know if I read a lot of this stuff, but I haven't read Spider-Man as an ongoing since, I'm trying to think, Nick Spencer was writing it.
Okay.
And that was the last time. So I don't know. I might try it out in solidarity, but it's just another spinal tire for me.
And I know this is a strong word, but I vividly recall you really strongly disliking the end of the Nick Spencer Amazing Spider-Man run.
Yeah, well, I jumped off. I don't know if I got to the end, but it was not my cup of tea as it went on. Not as bad as the Dan Slott run towards the end, but not as good.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, the Dan Slott run is tough to hold a candle to, no matter who you are, what you are, where you came from, sort of thing.
Right. Now, the Superior Spider-Man stuff, that stuff I like. The Spider-Man's Iron Man, that stuff I didn't like. So.
Okay. Right. I was kind of like rolling into the Nick Spencer stuff with Dan Slott, too. Yeah.
Bring back JM, and I'll come back.
I don't know. Well, again, more on that later, maybe. How about that?
Right.
Maybe not today, but another day. Last but not least, I guess there was a controversy that was maybe just a blown up controversy, if you ask me, over the last week in regards to the exorbitant prices that Jim Lee is charging for commissions.
You mean has been charging for commissions?
Right. So, yeah, go ahead with that if you would, Todd.
So, people were talking about what he's charging. I forget if it's because I don't have the numbers exactly in front of me, whether it's 20,000 or was it 20,000 or 30,000 for a full figure with a background and everything?
It's as low as 20 and as high as 35.
Right.
Now, you can get, again, my apologies. You could get as low, and so this is where the story gets blown up. You could get as low as $1,000. Okay. Mm-hmm. Small headshot is $1,000. Okay.
Right.
Then you go up to waist up with limited background. Okay. So then it's like 9 to 15,000. Blank comic cover, like the blank, those blank covers, is a bust shot, no background, 8,000, 12,000 if it's one of the wraparound blank covers.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you're going the full Megillah, 11 by 17, full figure, one character, that's 20 grand. If you want a second character, more detail in the background, etc., that could get you up to $35,000.
Right.
So you could get a Jim Lee head sketch for $1,000, and that's not the headline.
Mm-hmm. And did you mention the size on the 1,000? I forget.
It's okay. So the 1,000, it just says small headshot is all it says.
Okay, the one that I have says.
Oh, it says
size
yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Is 3¼ inches by 7 inches, which is super small. Because usually the smallest stuff that I've seen, this is becoming a more prevalent with the smaller sizes, is 9 by 12 was what they were doing a lot of headshots on, and then the 11 by 17 is like the full Megillah, usually the full body and stuff like that. But I just laughed at, because these prices aren't that much higher. They might have gone up a little bit, because I think it was 20 was the max and 35 was I'll give you all the bells and whistles in the background and stuff like that. But these are the prices he's been charging for years, and he did the Lake Como con in Italy, and that was posted earlier this year because we discussed it in the Discord at one point. And then, like, over the years, I've seen it in all the groups that I've been in, and people have all the same things. They're like, oh, it's so expensive. It's this and that. But Jim doesn't need the money. Jim's pages of art go for crazy money, like his X-Men stuff. This is, I think it's a bit of like, I don't want to draw, but I will for this kind of money. But a lot of times, like at shows, he'll do quick head sketches for free and give them out. And he's done stuff, and he's done charity work and this stuff. So I have really no problem. Get what you can. And he's also busy, doing stuff with DC Comics and stuff like that. So more power to you. More power to you. You've earned it after 33 years.
And I'll say my two thoughts on this as well are, Todd, this price listing that we have here, I'm not sure if I have any legal recourse, because these are also my prices to do sketches as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know how many offers I'm getting at this price?
How many, Joe?
Not as many as Jim Lee gets.
Right. If he gets it, then that's what they're worth,
Right. And, and obviously the industry has come out mostly on the side of Jim Lee. It's mainly art collectors that feel as though Jim Lee should be giving his art away for free, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes up, and Gail Simone, friend of the show.
Fair enough.
She posted a story, very long story short, 15 years ago, San Diego Comic-Con, they were doing a charity raffle for John Ostrander to get eye surgery, right?
Mm-hmm.
She went up to Jim Lee, asked him, hey, this is what we're doing it for. You want to do something? Could you do something? So Jim Lee does a full sketch of Batman and Wolverine together, and that was auctioned off to help John Ostrander, and that piece sold for $400. To which I say, if you wanted a Jim Lee piece that badly, you should have got one 15 years ago when they were only going for $400.
Yep.
And I bet you that piece that sold 15 years ago for $400 today probably sells for around $20,000 to $35,000.
Okay, now because I know the art game a little bit more. Maybe not because it's something that you see. It depends on whether you love it or you like it. Do you know what I mean? It could go for that prices. Commissions usually don't retain the value, because if I want something and Jim Lee's doing those prices, I can pick what I want at the same price. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
So I could get Wolverine in the costume I like. That might not be the costume I like in that picture. It's still going to go for good dollars because it's Jim Lee, but probably not the equal to like what you would pay if you get it now. It does, but I'm a big fan of like what he does, and I'm with you. You should have got it years ago or tried to get it years ago. I just think there's a lot of I don't want to say crybabies because we're a positive show on this, but people are like, because it's worth a lot of money, I can't have it, so I have to speak out about it. It's like it prices out the fans. We're the fans who bought all his books over the years, and now we can't afford this art or these pages or whatever. And I always do this answer, and it sounds cruddy. It really does. But I go, Jim Lee could give you whatever he wants, but he doesn't owe you anything, or any other creator. Well, you say, well, I made it possible to make all that money. And I say, yes, but you gave him X amount of dollars and he gave you a comic. Transaction over. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're making it sound like you kickstarted him with money out of your pocket for nothing, and then he became a star. It's like, no, you got it at the time. If it was $1.50 a comic or a $2 comic, you paid $2. You got $2 worth of his art, and that's it. He really doesn't owe you anything else or anybody else. I don't know if that's making my opinion makes any sense to you.
It does. And again, And again, as you mentioned, we are a bit of a positive show, but situations like this, we do need to kind of face facts and say that there is fan base. There's segments of any fan base that is not happy with what they get. Yep. They always want more for less. Right. Or they feel as though their longtime fandom deserves them X. Well, that's great. The person that you're having this interaction with may not know that. And you could tell them that, and I'm sure they're appreciative, but that doesn't mean you get a free sketch or extra FaceTime or a free dinner or whatever, right?
Yep.
You get what everyone else is entitled to, whether you've been a fan of his work for 30 years or 30 days.
Mm-hmm. And I just see, like I said, and then if it's something that's valued, why should you be able to sell? Like, if you wanted to sell it immediately and flip it, make the money that he could have got. That's the thing. I think a lot of people are just think of the investment, and I use the quotation investment. It's something that I should have that's worth a lot of money, and I should spend a little bit on it. And that's I'll end it there before I start going off on a tangent that makes me sound very angry.
And like I said with that, the last bit of all of this is, obviously you were a little bit more tuned in, tied into the art world, as it were, so you have a little bit more knowledge about these sort of things, right?
Right.
So that's all. You've been on the ground floor. You've seen these sort of things. Yeah.
And I've been priced out, Joe. Like, we've talked about this. But do you hear me complain about it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just go, no. I don't get art anymore. Like, it's like me going, I deserve a Lamborghini. Like, I can't afford it, so I'm going to settle for the Chevette,
Yeah.
Because that's what I can get.
But I've been a fan of the Lamborghini for all my life. I've had the poster on my wall since I was a kid. Don't I deserve one?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Anyway,
Jim Lee will not be at any conventions this weekend, but there is a convention in Denver, where one of my neighbors is from Fan Expo in Denver. And I'm not going to do the joke, but by mentioning that I'm not going to do the joke is like I'm doing the joke. I'm putting a hat on a hat. But there's a pretty stacked lineup, right?
Right.
More stacked than Fan Expo Orlando, I would say. Jeff John's going to be there. Scott Snyder's going to be there. Jason Aaron's going to be there. Ivan Hayes is going to be there. Francis Manipool is going to be there. Kevin McGuire is going to be there. And media guests, Todd. Now, Todd, I'm putting a gun to your head.
Okay.
And you got to pick just one.
Mm-hmm.
Are you getting the Mark picture this weekend at Fan Expo Denver with star of Megaforce, amongst many other genre hits, Barry Bostwick, or are you getting the Mark picture with Homelander? Real Homelander, not Inspiration Homelander.
Okay. Now, you're not going to add Rosario Dawson to this?
Rosario Dawson, you can just wave and say hi to her. That's enough. You don't need to be talking to her.
Out of the three, if she was wearing the costume from Sin City, I'm getting my Mark photo with Rosario Dawson.
Okay, what if Homelander, Anthony Starr, is wearing the full Homelander outfit, and you get to chug a thing of milk with him in the picture?
Ooh, So I'll still get to see Rosario Dawson in the costume as I walk by. So I'm going to get the Mark photo with Homelander.
Mm-hmm.
But if Barry's in the skin-tight Lycra with the blue headband, that trumps all, Joe.
Interesting choice of words. I'm still going with the Anthony Starr one.
You do understand that I'm doing like the quick calculation in my head that I don't know how much longer Barry Bostwick has.
Oh, come on. He's a spry something.
Right. But maybe he's going to retire from cons, All right. Anthony Starr's a young man, and he's probably got one more season of The Boys. So I could get him again in the now. If you told me it was a one-time only ever costume opportunity,
ooh, yes,
then I'm doing that. But otherwise, all things equal, I'm getting the oldest person first, and then working my way down the list.
Like we've talked before about these conventions where there's random doctors that are at them,
Right.
And it's like, nope, got to go with the doctor. Like this could be their last day.
Yep. Unless I already have a photo with him, then I can move on to the next one. Like I'll never get John Hurt because he passed away, and I'll never get Tom Baker because he never leaves his house. So, but if they were at a con, those would be the first two I went for.
You can go to Tom Baker's house.
I bet you I could find it.
Yeah.
There's a big scarf on the doorknob.
Oh, my goodness. That means that's code for something, I think.
Scarf code, Joe.
Mm-hmm. Similar to the hanky code, right?
But different. But the Doctor Who scarf has all different colors, so it's very confusing.
Mm-hmm. Very confusing. So the link to Fan Expo Denver, if you're going to be in the area, is in the show notes, along with information about the soon-to-be-named network at soon-to-be-named-network.tumblr.com. Anytime any of the shows go live, of course you can find them at their own individual websites. Of course you can find them on the podcatcher of your choice. But the one-stop shop for all the shows in the soon-to-be-named network is at soon-to-be-named-network.tumblr.com. And that, of course, includes this show that you're listening to right now. Longbox Heroes After Dark, Puzzle Warriors 3, Profane Arguments, Wings on Wings, who are currently on summer hiatus, Porch Talk, which apparently is also on summer hiatus for some reason, We Need Wrestling, Final Wrestling Place, and At Odds with Wrestling. And if any of these folks show up on any other shows and they let me know, it'll also be there as well, so you don't miss the appearances of your favorite soon-to-be-named network folks. And first time in public saying this, I'm going to be making a return to one of my favorite podcasts in the near future.
I heard rumblings, Joe.
Yes, I'm very excited. A little nervous because a competition show. I don't want to give too much away. Recording it next Monday. And again, I feel confident in my memories on this one, but I'm going against, I would never say two ringers, but definitely two people who certainly know their stuff.
Right.
But also, of course, with the links over with the show notes, you could check out our friends who are doing stuff in and around the world of the internet. That includes Mike Sterling over at his blog at progressiveruin.com. Our friend Kevin over at his blog at helionsteam.com. Rick Williams, the Chop Shop at freekaratechops.storeenvy.com. All those resin, muscle-esque figures, those toys from the 80s. Muscle's coming back. There's a new series that's starting here very soon. I'm very excited for that Muscle. Kaniku Man. Again, I'm American, so I always default to calling it that. Jason Sandberg's Jupiter is available still a la carte over on the Indiegogo. That's in the show notes. Chris Runt's Battle Monsters is still available to purchase digitally or in print over at his site, fortressofcomicnews.com. Our good friend Davey of the band Cave People has his website up for all of his self-published comics at cavedomaincomics.com. And of course, if you do not have a comic book store in your area, or you do not have a good comic book store in your area, let our store be your store. Comics on the Green, they will let you know whenever the new books are going to be available. If there's any delays, I saw that there was some delays if you were getting Marvel stuff through Penguin this week, but as I understand it, our retailer was not affected. But if our retailer was affected, you'd know about it if you were on their Facebook page. Mm-hmm. While you're there, you could also sign up for their mail order subscription service, get books sent right to you, whether you get them sent to you weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly. There's a chance that you can get a sketch on the package from our good friend Beckie, who we're going to turn things over to now for my walk down Lois Lane.
Welcome back to my walk down Lois Lane. Today we're going to talk about some sales numbers. I have sales numbers from Comicron, who collected information from the 50s to the 70s, and then R.S. Martin Blogspot, who has numbers from the 70s to the 90s. But this is taking into account a few things. This is units sold by year. I rounded the numbers up slightly so I didn't have to say every single digit, and according to behind-the-scene publishing articles, realistically, these numbers actually only had a 20 to 70% sell-through. So I'm going off of what DC was reporting was sold at the time. Everything else I say is purely speculative and anecdotal because I got the majority of my information from reading the letters pages and what editorial was telling readers at the time, and from random things I found on the internet. So let's dive in. In 1965, Lois Lane sold 557,000 copies. Jimmy Olsen sold 555,000 copies. And this was behind Superman, who was selling a whopping 824,000 copies. People could not get enough of the Superman family. So by 71 and 72, when they took their creative directions in Jimmy and Lois, the sales numbers were slipping. In 71, Lois sold only 233,000 copies, which is half. And by 72, I actually can't find her in the top 50, so she has to be under the lowest selling comic, which was Young Love, with 118,000 copies. If you remember, Young Love is the Simon and Kirby Crestwood romance book sold to DC after they were sued by Simon and Kirby for not paying them. Again, everything I talk about all connects. Dakota Johnson, Madam Web of Girl Comics. So we know what happened with Lois and the creative direction of doing the more realistic stories, featuring the race relations and the women's liberation movement, having 3 roommates that are essentially cardboard cutouts, and lessening Superman from the majority of the stories, with the letters pages reflecting this. But what happened to Jimmy Olsen? It's Jack Kirby's fault. It is. I'm semi-joking, but Jack Kirby didn't help. Kirby jumped on the book in 1970 when the sales numbers were around 300,000, down from its years before, because according to readers, the stories were lackluster and just not as fun. When Kirby took over and gave the world things like Project Cadmus, Darkseid, and the Fourth World, readers were heavily mixed. The letters pages boiled down to essentially 2 things. Kirby's artwork didn't suit the Jimmy Olsen look that readers were used to, and the stories that I read don't really focus on Jimmy, which is kind of the point of the book. Some readers were so dissatisfied that they wrote in years later explaining they had dropped the book for some time, only to pick it back up when it seemed more classic. By 1972, Jimmy Olsen was selling 196,000 copies, which is a really long way from its 600,000 height. In an attempt to keep readers, DC cancelled Lois, Jimmy, and Supergirl and merged them into the Superman family, but continued with Jimmy Olsen's numbering. That's why it starts at issue 164. Sales numbers for Superman Family in 73 started at 179,000, still not hitting its original highs, and continued to decline until it was cancelled in 1982. By then, it didn't even crack top 50. The lowest was GI Combat with 59,000, so we can assume it sold less than that. During the 70s, Archie began to take over top spots, with just about every one of their titles cracking top 25, and then Marvel titles nobody ever heard of, like Spider-Man and Thor, rose in rankings, so Superman was just pushed aside for new heroes. By the mid-80s, Big Blue barely sold 100,000 copies, while titles like Transformers, G.I. Joe, and X-Men were selling in the upper 300,000 to 400,000 range. The 60s sales numbers honestly explain why we see so many issues of Lois, Jimmy, and Archie in collections we pick up at the shop. While I don't typically read classic Superman, I understand the hype it had, and why readers not only bought the main title, but all of the Superman books like Action Comics and Superboy. I am going to go check out some classic Jimmy Olsen and see why he's so popular, and maybe we can talk about him on here. I hope you guys find sales numbers as interesting as I do. I know Joe does, and I know Dave does here at the shop. It's insane to think that comics had sales numbers of 824,000 when you think about the type of stuff that moves today. Tune in next week, and we'll go back for some more Lois Lane.
Thank you very much, Becky, and oh, do I salivate at the talk of sales numbers, especially fascinatingly how much of a stranglehold Superman and Superman Family comics had on the comics industry well into the late 60s, early 70s.
Mm-hmm. When I started hearing this this segment come to me, I was like, oh, it's numbers. Joe's going to be in his glory. I'll say this. I'll do the joke so I don't, but like my eyes glaze over when numbers get talked about. But, fascinating job of this. It wasn't boring. You know what I mean? Like, it was very, educational. So I enjoyed it. But numbers aren't my thing because I can't grasp onto them. Because I need to see them in front of me as you're talking about them, so I could look at the numbers and reference them and go back. Because once you go from one, like if you say Superman was at this number and Jimmy Olsen was at this number, I've forgotten the Superman number. So I don't know if that makes any sense. I have to like put them together so I could see the differences in them. But like I said, she did a great job on explaining it to a big dumb head like me.
So she had also mentioned in there about the Jack Kirby takeover of the Jimmy Olsen book, which became less of a Jimmy Olsen book and more of a Fourth World New Gods book.
Yes. I don't know if you ever heard, like, when Jack Kirby came over from Marvel, he was offered like any of the mainstream Superman books, like the Superman, the action kind of stuff. And this I give Jack credit, because he could have demanded anything he wanted. But rumors are, and they also say there's many stories to this, that he refused to take work away because those books had writers and artists, definitive writers and artists doing runs on those books. But Jimmy Olsen was like a hodgepodge of just like, get this book out, if that makes any sense, of like writers and artists.
Yeah, so like we have all these like who's got a Jimmy Olsen story?
Right. But he would not take, his kind of thing was, I won't take food out of any creator's mouths over here. Mm-hmm. And I really, really like respect that kind of stuff. Like and George Perez, even though that is a different topic, like when he came over, they wanted to give him JLA. And he was like, no, there's creators on that. And that's kind of how Titans came about. You know what I mean? With Marv Wolfman. So I'm like, oh, that's always really, really great. But in the course of that, like, Jack Kirby was kind of disrespected a little bit, but I do understand it too, is about them redrawing all the Kirby faces on Superman, right?
Yes.
Which I think I get because he was a brand, but it's very weird to see the Kirby blocky bodies with the Kurt Swan face, and that always threw me. But Jack Kirby over there, good guy as far as I was concerned. I don't know if you know that. Jack Kirby was an all right artist and had a few good creations under his sleeves.
Right. And speaking of which, and again, I know he wasn't directly involved with these books, but, again, close enough. I mentioned earlier, Mike in the Discord, go follow him on social media, Virtual Pros. And, of course, follow the social media account Rack Spinner as well. Now, there's rumor and innuendo of who Rack Spinner is associated with or whatever, but I can't argue with news and facts if that gives you a hint.
Right.
But on this day, as we record in comic book history,
we need a jingle.
I would, if I was a little bit more quick on the draw, I would have played the This Day in Wrestling History jingle and just said comics over wrestling.
Right.
But it's too late now. This day in comic history, 61 years ago, both Avengers #1 and X-Men #1 were published.
Two worthless comics now.
Again,
send them all to me.
You know what? Time will tell.
That is true.
Right. Can't judge just yet.
Right.
Go ahead.
Was there another book too, or am I mistaken?
There was another book. This day in comic book history, 50 years ago, Incredible Hulk #180 came out, which is the actual real first appearance cameo of Wolverine.
Right, by Roy Thomas.
Yes.
Right, creator of Wolverine. His
world famous creation. Yes, Wolverine. Yes. But that's the thing, 181 gets all the love because Wolverine's on the cover, and that's like the full first appearance. But, I don't know. He appears in that last panel on 80. I count 180 as his first appearance.
You know my conspiracy theory about 181, right? About the Marvel stamp. I think I've said that on the show. If I said it on the show, I'll say it again. Because Hulk 181 had the Marvel stamps that people cut out.
Yes.
I think a lot of people started to lean towards that one as the first appearance of Wolverine because having them cut up made the full ones that are undamaged more valuable and hard to find. So it was, if you owned one, it was even more expensive. I think it's really a conspiracy theory by comic shop owners to up the value of their comic.
All right, I guess I feel as though because it had the Lakeside tattoo, or was it the Lakeside tattoo or the stamp? The Hobgoblin is the Lakeside tattoo.
Yes, Hobgoblin had the tattoo.
Yeah, so the stamp. What I would say is because it had the stamp and because it's tougher to find copies that are intact with the stamp, I would just say, okay, well, 180 is the one I have, so 180 is the first appearance.
But what if he was in an ad in another comic?
Well, that's a question for Todd McFarlane to answer, I think.
Right, because 50 years ago they didn't have previews, Joe.
Right, they didn't have Malibu Sun, and they didn't have all the other nonsense that existed.
Reanimator stuff. Comics.
Yeah, exactly. So thanks everyone who contributes to this brief history segment on the show. Let's get into more recent history, Todd. Where would you like to begin with what we read from this past week?
I'll start with Absolute Power Ground Zero, #1, by various writers from Wade, Williamson, Maines, Zdarsky, various artists too. I won't go into all of them because it takes too much time. But it's basically 3 different stories. These are kind of like a prequel to the Ground Zero story, and they all they all definitely revolve around Amanda Waller and her machinations. This first story is told about Jay Nakamura, who was not Jonathan. Yeah, it was
Jonathan Kent.
Superman's boyfriend in the Superman books, and he's kind of on the run in his home island, and he's getting chased by I forget the name of the superhero. Dream. I forget her name, but she goes after him, and they kind of pick. Amanda wants him for something, and it's kind of trailing off from a Suicide Squad book. So this is kind of them finishing up their story. Then we go on to another story by Chip Zdarsky where Time Commander, who's this little known like Silver Age character, shows up, and Amanda wants help from him with Failsafe because we find out that she grabbed the Failsafe robot body, and she wants him to work together. And he has kind of this confusing backstory because apparently he was dead in a recent comic, but I don't really understand it. But we're going to what Amanda Waller's trying to do with Failsafe, and they kind of give you the hint. And then finally we have the Joshua Williamson story where it kind of wraps up out of the House of Brainiac story, where Brainiac sends the queen that he kind of created, daughter or whatever you will, away because he was being destroyed. And Amanda Waller once again gets her hands on it and proceeds to kind of raise it. And you find out how all that works because she seems to be raising it over years. But they kind of explain it all. So it's setting all the pieces to go into Ground Zero. I will say this, I enjoyed the story, but I wasn't like, oh my God, this is the best story ever. It's just basically a prime in the pump for Ground Zero, 3 short stories. I say if you want to get it and you read any of those, like the Superman book or whatever, maybe it'll lead you into Ground Zero, but I'll be honest, I don't know if you definitely need this book to read Ground Zero, if that makes any sense.
I think we had the luxury of reading, and obviously, it's been about a year since the book was out there. The Adventures of Superman with Jonathan Kent as the lead book. Right. We had the luxury of reading the current Superman story arc, and we had the luxury of reading Batman. Mm-hmm. So we knew all this stuff kind of coming into play. Like, we didn't need to be familiarized with Failsafe, with the Brainiac Queen, with Nakamura. All that stuff was there for us, but this was more or less like, hey, here's how Amanda Waller got all these people.
Right, okay.
Now, there is the bit with that time magician guy, whose name escapes me right now.
Time Commander.
Time Commander. I thought that stuff was interesting because that was new. Time Commander wasn't any other book that I'm reading. I don't know if he been in whatever the current Suicide Squad stuff was, but again, time travel stuff in comics could be a little strange, a little weird, not read right, whatever. And I thought this was an interesting take on it. And this felt like, maybe there have been, and maybe I'm just misreading it just because it's happened in the past, where you get a writer coming onto a project, and it's not really Mark Waid's calling card, but it is maybe some other writers' calling cards, where we're going to take this unknown or lesser-known character, and we're going to try to use this event or this big-name book to kind of maybe give this character a new life and shine him up and maybe elevate him to the next level.
Right.
Or this just could be a throwaway gag with this character, right?
I do know that he recently appeared. What was the Batman book where Wild Dog appeared in? Remember Chip?
The Brave and the Bold.
The Brave and the Bold. He was in that for one issue or like a storyline and ended up dying. And that's where he shows up in the beginning of this. He's like, oh, I was dead. What happened? And they explain it a little bit. Mm-hmm. But I think he's brought in, he's getting the push, if that makes any sense, I think. So
yeah,
we'll see.
So the other book that we both read from this past week was the Thanos Annual #1, written by Derek Landy with art by Salvador Larroca. Again, for the purpose of this discussion, we will call them gems.
Okay, thank you.
Thanos has made death into the Death Infinity Gem.
Right.
But it doesn't work the way that he always thought it would. So he has to go and get all the other Infinity Gems. But the other Infinity Gems have become actual people. So now Thanos has to go and hunt these people down. Some of them are using their powers for good. Some of them are trying to become full-fledged superheroes. Some of them are just trying to lay low. This is the beginning of the story of Thanos attempting to hunt these people down to extract the gems from them, and those that remain attempting to get actual heroes to help them.
Mm-hmm.
This is the beginning of a storyline that's going to be going through several of the annuals this summer over at Marvel.
Right. Did you enjoy it?
So it was light. It was fun. I loved Salvador Larroca's art in this. If it wasn't going through all the annuals, if it was something that was going on in actual books that I was reading, I wouldn't be upset that this was going on. But this was a real good pull to get you. This was a great selling point to get you in to get those annuals. But it didn't work on me. Don't work a worker.
Right. I thought they did an interesting job with Thanos. I liked him. Like I said, he's back after the gems. But there was one bit, especially when one of the characters is talking to Thanos, and he's like, you just don't understand how things work anymore. Fact is, we're not some dainty little gems that you can fit into your glove. And she says little gems, which I was like, all right, that's the way they used to be. This is the new way. Things are the new way things are. The game has changed. I'm like, is Marvel directly talking to me through comics now? So I was like, okay. And then in the end, things go awry for them. And they kind of lead the end with like, how many times can, you be spurned and keep bouncing back? We're going to find out with Thanos. And I'm like, I think he's going to be a bad, bad man, if that makes any sense. So I kind of want to read it, but I'm with you. Annuals all the way through. I could tap out with this. And if they're going to call them stones, that's going to be my excuse. I'll be petty and make it my excuse.
Now, again, to sell this a little bit further, right? Again, I'm not getting it. But I don't think there's a ton of annuals that you have to get.
No, I think there's one for each of the gems.
Right. Well, okay. So, and again, I don't know how many, because there's 3 in July, 2 in August, and 3 in September.
Okay.
If I do my Gazintas, that's 8.
Is that counting the Thanos one that we have?
Thanos is 9.
Okay, so you got to count that one.
So it's 9 annuals that you have to pick up to get the full story.
I don't have mine right in front of me. What was the price of the end of Thanos annual? Or don't you know?
Where am I looking here? Hang on.
Looking at mine or the thing now.
I gotta turn around.
Take your time.
$5.
It's not too bad. So it's a $4.99er basically.
Yeah.
That's. I honestly thought they'd be $7.99. You know what I mean, for annuals.
For sure.
But that's not a bad. Who knows? Maybe I'll get suckered in at some point and put in my Thanos box. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. You're a sucker.
I am. You can work this worker, Joe.
That's right. So that's what we read from this past week. Let's get into what we're looking forward to coming out this week. If you head over to longboxheroes.com, every Tuesday around noon Eastern time, we put up the poll post, which is a link to all the books that are coming out this week. Whether you get your books in print, whether you get them digitally, whether you get them sent to your home, however it is you get your books, be forewarned, be forearmed, know what's coming out this week. Todd and I attempt to guess what the other is most looking forward to coming out this week. Todd is currently in the lead over me with one correct guess.
Mm-hmm.
And we both have relatively slender reads of a list this week.
Right.
And I'm going to guess the book that you're most looking forward to coming out this week is Free Agents #1.
It is. Is the book you're also looking forward to most Free Agents numero uno?
It is.
Right. I got 2, Joe. I'm getting 2 when they come out. Because I have one for my regular box and one for my Kevin McGuire box. Because there's a Kevin, orderable variant cover.
Yep. And when I was doing my cover list on Friday, and I saw that there was a Kevin cover, and it's a real nice cover, and I'm like, I don't need to tell Todd that this exists. I think Todd knows this exists.
Yep. And you know what? I'll give our shop another little shout out. If it does fall through the cracks, which stuff does with me, I'll walk in, and as long as it's not a $50 like 1 in 200, they'll be like, we got it. Do you want it? Yeah, I'll take it. Like, they won't let a Kevin McGuire cover slide by without me knowing about it if I don't ask about it.
Right.
They know me well.
Certainly. So while you're over at longboxheroes.com, of course, be sure to check out past episodes of this show, past episodes of Longbox Heroes After Dark, and be sure to check out and follow along with us with our current Todd and Joe Have Issues as we are rereading Gail Simone's Secret Six from the very beginning. We are trenched in the depths, pun intended, of the current storyline, issue 10, which is the beginning of a story arc called Depths.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a good chunk of this story is establishing our baddies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they do a really good job of establishing a baddie who controls through fear and manipulation and so forth, right? And we all know in the very short amount of time that we've been with our heroes, in the 6, how they deal with that sort of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they are, the main crux of the story is they are hired on by some sort of mission with this person through Mockingbird. Mockingbird, if you remember, was the guys that Lex Luthor had used that put the 6 together originally in Villains United all the way back there. And this is a lot of focus, this issue, on Deadshot, Bane, Scandal, and the Banshee whose name is escaping me right now.
Jeanette.
Not so much. We get like a line from Ragdoll. We get a little bit from Catman. Those are the folks that are established. We don't need a ton from them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of this issue is just continuing to test and show the bonds between these characters, their motivations between some of these characters, especially Jeanette, who's newish, especially Deadshot, who's kind of, I would say, probably the most, if you were looking at a D&D chart, he is the one most closely to, like, chaotic evil out of anyone, where everyone else kind of falls on, like, chaotic neutral to maybe, like, neutral in general.
Okay.
And, you know, obviously, and then putting them into the situation with our new villain. Now, obviously, there's a B plot involving the continuation, the strengthening of the relationship, as it were, between Bane and Scandal. And again, of course, that is a big part of what this is. But another part that I forgot that comes up with this is that there's ties on this to the upcoming Amazon Attacks book.
Right, because Artemis shows up.
Right, which I had completely forgot about.
Me too.
Go ahead.
So me too, I have completely forgot about Artemis.
So this is a good book. There's a good issue. We've been loving it so far. But this is the first, you know, outside of Artemis being in here, and again, not a knock on Artemis, but Artemis is not Batman or Bat Family people or whomever else that you have show up, right? But this is the book that begins a little bit of the stray of this book from, like, being a mainline entrenched in the DC Universe book. Maybe there's parallels to this book to Suicide Squad. Feel we're going away from that as well. But also, this was maybe the least funny issue of this that we've read so far.
Yeah, other than a few gags, because obviously Ragdoll isn't in it a lot, and establishing a lot of the characters. And definitely the villain, once again, that's the one thing, give Gail Simone a lot of credit, because we're 10 issues in and all the villains have been completely deplorable shows.
Yes. Zero redeeming qualities.
Right, none, zero. So when we get to this one again, right off the rip, you know, in the opening scene, to get the people to do what he wants, he's just like, evil stuff happens everywhere. I'm not going to go through all the bits, but there's no mistaking what you're seeing. And so there's not a lot of humor. And then on top of that, we kind of get a role reversal with Bane and Scandal.
Yes.
Because in this, Bane has been, she needs a father figure, and he's going to be it. You can only have one ice cream before you go to sleep. To Bane's losing his mind because he's jonesing for Venom because he took it a few issues ago, and Scandal understanding, you know, the relationship is going to help him. And I like it. She's like, he wakes up and he's looking for his Venom and he can't find it, and she has it, and they kind of have a back and forth, and she goes, you know what, listen, this is your problem. If you say you want to take the Venom, I'll walk away and you'll never hear me talking about it again. He's like, no, I have to be free of it. And she's like, okay, this is going to be the toughest moment of your life. And we don't often read, but when she goes, you know, because he's getting into bed and she tells him, you know, I don't sleep in beds with men. You know that? Yes. He's like, yes. She's like, and, you know, this means nothing, what I'm about to do, and can never mean anything. He's like, yes. She goes, but you understand it still means something. And that is such a great line because, you know, you can go a million different ways with couples getting into bed, but she's like, that last line hits home hard because this means I care for you. And this means something in that I'm going to help you get through this tonight. And once again, it's another characterization bit between the two of them that works so well. And it's, like I said, that's all I had to read. And you don't need anything else. You don't need to hammer it home with dialogue and make it half the book. Gail hits it, gives you everything you need to know, and now it's on to the mission. And I absolutely love that she knows where to be minimal but poignant at the same time.
Right. And again, it's not even heavy-handed, again, pun intended. Is there the bit where they're on the plane going with the mission, delivering the cargo, and Bane and Scandal are holding hands on the plane? Deadshot makes a remark about it, and they just ignore him.
Right.
And that's it. You know, they're not going to acknowledge it. It's not going to get a big deal to be played about it, but it's the show subtly of the continuation of the strengthening of their relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But again, yeah, this was a really good issue. But like I said, we've come to know and love the humor of this book, and this issue had none of that.
Right.
Or a little enough that it wouldn't be.
Right. Way less than any other issue. Others were not always funny, but it was always peppered in, especially with Ragdoll. But I think she knew she needed to tone Ragdoll down to get the messages across that she wanted.
Right. That's a good point. So we got issue 11 next week. The story rolls on, right?
Pretty much. We're going to plumb the depths, if you will, Joe.
So while you're over at the site, of course, I'm going to mention the store page there. We got shirts, we got pins, we got stickers. Reach out to me. I'll help you out. We'll get some shirts and pins and stickers in your hand. If you want more variety of stuff, our T Public store is having a sale until the 7th. And that's 35% off everything. Designs inspired by this show. Designs inspired by After Dark. Soon to be named Network. All the shows. On everything from stickers to decorative throws to 2 different types of hats.
2?
Exactly. You could also help us out by making any and all of your purchases through our eBay affiliate link. This page contains affiliate links for eBay. We may receive a small commission on purchases you make. You could use the affiliate link at any time and buy anything on eBay and support us at the same time.
Yeah.
Also, you can support us directly and beneficially to you by signing up for our Patreon at patreon.com/longboxheroes. For as little as $1 a month, you are going to get 2 bonus shows from Todd and myself. One is Comic Book Oddities, where we look at some of the lesser-known, more maligned, canceled pilots, mostly pre-Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff that spun out of the world of comic books. Most recently up there is Dylan Dog Dead by Night. We also do Previewing the Past, where we look at 30 years ago this month's previews catalog. We're getting ready to record July of 1994 this weekend, and I already got a chance to peruse that one, and there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. I just perused a little early, so I got to dig back through my notes to find what I perused. If you're at the $5 level, you're going to get those shows 2 weeks before everyone else does. You're also going to get After Dark 2 days before everyone else does, so that you can listen to these shows in the correct listening order. And no matter what level on the Patreon that you are at, you're going to get the full scans, high quality, expertly done of those previews catalogs that we discuss on Previewing the Past. And listen, I say it all the time, Previewing the Past could be a daunting show to listen to. It's a 3-hour plus podcast more times than not. It's a lot of information, but you got in the comics in the 90s. We're currently in the DC 0-hour Marvel Spider Clone Saga era of stuff. If that stuff reminds you of when you got into comic books, or maybe you got into comic books earlier than that, just going back and looking through those previous catalogs, I think is enough of a walk down memory lane to kind of scratch that itch to get into what we talk about on those Previewing the Past podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's time for TV talk?
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into a discussion about The Acolyte first.
Sure, why not?
And you, I think, Todd, have to take a victory lap on this, you said? Is that correct?
Yes, because I'm going to pat myself on the back. And I predicted who Smilo Ren was. So I heard that online. Smilo Ren cracked me up. So
yeah, I thought it was going to be one of the mothers, but alas, it was not.
I'll say this though, Joe. I predict, because it's unveiled that the evil Sith or whatever, and I don't know if 100% they're Sith. He says you could call me Sith, but that doesn't mean that he definitely is. I think he's the apprentice. You know how there's always one master, one apprentice? I think he's the apprentice, and he was sent out to find the twins. I think his master's one of the mothers. So I think we're both going to be right on this, if that makes any sense. The villains are going to be the people we said, but there's 2 of them. So I think you will be redeemed before this is over.
Right, but I thought this was a good action-y packed episode. So much happened in this episode. So many people died in this episode.
Right.
Which was very shocking at this point. I think because you said there's, 2 episodes left? 3 episodes left after this one?
3, I think.
Right, so
3.
For them to kill off, 2 of the lead characters and maybe Pip was very interesting. If I have a complaint about this episode, I have 2 complaints on the episode.
Go ahead.
And maybe just because this one is new and I've never seen it happen before, and that would be at several points the lightsabers were failing for the Jedis, they couldn't get them to work for some reason.
Okay, apparently I was talking with the definitive Colonel Sanders artist today about Acolyte, and he said that there's something that he's wearing, whether they're bands on his arm or the helmet, that if he hits the saber or the device, it short circuits them for a little while. And I could not pick up that visual to save my life.
Yeah, so if that was something, that's not something that was made clear by the show itself, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That, number 1, and then number 2, I know it's been this way, but it was kind of very much on the nose this episode, in that it was very clear that Osha was wearing white and May was wearing black. So 1, you know who the good one and the bad one is.
Mm-hmm.
But also, so when they do the costume switch later on,
right,
there's a reason that they do the costume switch.
And I do like that she gives her self the lightsaber mullet. That's pretty cool.
But yeah, like I said, this was a fun episode, but because there was so much action in it, it's tough to be like, oh, this is a cool scene, and that was a cool scene. I don't know.
Right, because it was just a slaughter.
Yeah.
It was just a slaughter early on. I will say this, and I was talking to the Mad Bassist, and I didn't talk about it last week, but when May's the bad one, right? May switched, remember when she was just talking with the goofy guy who turns out to be the Sith, and she just goes, you know what? I'm going to turn myself in, and I'm going to throw myself at the mercy of the Jedi because my sister's alive. And you're like, it makes no sense. And then he explained it to me. The whole bit was she had to kill the Wookiee without using a weapon. I think she passed the test by pretending to switch sides. She maybe knew that guy was her master. And by doing that, the Smilo Ren killed the Wookiee, and that's to do I killed him without a weapon. I got you to do it, so I did pass the test. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's what she's doing, because then immediately she reverts back to I don't want anything to do with the Jedi. Mm-hmm. So I think that's where we're going, if that makes any sense.
It does.
And Pip is fine, Joe, because Osha said, I'm sorry, Pip, I got to sacrifice you. And she turns the light on, and that grabs, the evil guy, and the bugs attack him for the light. But then Basil picks up the light when he finds it, and he's going to bring it back to her and put it on May, who has Pip now, and everything's going to be okay. But I think he's the one Pip and Basil are the one who's going to give up the ghost that there's been a costume change.
Have they announced a Pip Basil 2-pack? Because I might have to buy that.
I think they have. Okay. But I do want to say this about the show. I haven't said a lot about it because, I always joke, you know how I say I'm not a Jedi guy. You're an alien guy. I'm the scoundrel guy. But I don't think either of us are Jedi people. This show and the prequels make me dislike all Jedi because they're very, the more, when I learned about the Jedi in the first 3 movies, it was Obi-Wan and it was Luke, and we learned a little, and they were mysterious. But now it's we're going to kidnap your children. You could never love anybody. You could never see your family again. Emotions suck. So we're all dry characters because we can't get angry because that's going to the dark side of the Force. So they're very boring people who steal children and tell them not to have emotions. I'm starting to come around that all Jedi are bad, Joe. So I don't know. They make, the more I see them, the more I dislike them. And I think Saul did a bad thing on Osha and May's planet. And he's the one who made everything go sideways. And we're going to find something terrible out about him. But I don't know. I'm in the middle of the road on the show. I don't love it and I don't hate it, but I'm watching it at this point.
I'm enjoying it. I think it's good. I think you should check it out, especially this episode, because
this episode was the best.
Yeah, and you'd mentioned about Soul, so I'm going to give Soul the benefit of the doubt and say he may not have acted directly to cause the fire or whatever happened to the planet, but I definitely think he purposely did not act to stop it.
Okay.
Like, it's a fine line, but that's my line.
Right. And the other thing is, like, you know how we say that all the Jedi that they took, there was a lot of red shirt Jedi here that they massacred. But that's because we have to go with that. You go by the prequels that the Sith haven't been seen in 1,000 years. So anybody who sees that red lightsaber and sees and hears him say the words, "I am a Sith," they all have to die. Because nobody could report this back to the council.
Or go into hiding or something.
I think like May and Osha are going to disappear. I think Saul and all the other Jedi who were on the planet that saw it died. So Saul is going to be like, I'm going to go be a hermit because whatever I did was wrong. But that's why the council doesn't know anything about the Sith when we get 100 years later into the prequels.
Right.
I'm just getting deep into timelines because everybody I see online has complained about this, and it's fun to read the comments. I'm sorry, I meant to say never read the comments.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it came up on At Odds this past week because Kevin of Team Hellions called in regards to about toxic fan bases in general, whether it be wrestling, comics, Star Wars. The boys over at Red Letter Media did a discussion on it. And, they've been kind of, they're publicly Star Wars fans. They did the Mr. Plinkett video all those years ago that gets blamed for people turning on the prequels.
Okay.
Even though the Mr. Plinkett videos came out 10 years after the prequels were out.
Right, because they were beloved till then.
Right, they were beloved movies, and they're now being re-beloved by the audience that just hates these things. And they kind of do a very even-handed of, like, lapsed Star Wars fans going into the show with no expectations, kind of a discussion in regards to the way that both sides, whether it be the Kathleen Kennedy side, the fan base sides, etc., are handling things in what essentially is just a, as you say, not a great, but not a terrible Star Wars product. As
people say, nobody hates Star Wars more than the Star Wars fan. So
yes.
So, Homelander, what do you want to talk about?
That's right, Todd. It's time for us to discuss the latest episode of The Boys.
Sweet.
That's going to be the new stinger, by the way, for when we talk about it.
And just remember, you're the one who made this a sound clip show, not me.
All right. I drug myself kicking and screaming into this.
Now I'm going to be writing down all the sound clips I need to put on your board. But okay, let's get to The Boys.
So there's a lot going on in this episode of The Boys. It's difficult to go through it narratively. It's more so character-driven-y. But it's very easy this time around because everyone's kind of sort of together. So, the main crux of this is the boys going to break Stan Edgar out of prison, and they're going to get him a pardon if he could get them the virus that will kill Homelander.
Right.
He takes them to his old country home, which Victoria has turned into a lab, making the virus, but unfortunately, Compound V gotten into the water supply, and all the animals, from chicken to sheep, are all Compound V'd up.
And one bunny.
And maybe Homelander sees a little bit of kinship with. Or not Homelander. Billy Butcher sees a little bit of kinship with, and I give credit to Billy Butcher. I sat here on this very show last week when the information about why Starlight and Firecracker have beef, and she knows, and they asked her point blank, what's your problem with her? What's her problem with you? And she's like, oh, I don't know. And this week's episode, they're like, how were you able to kill the stretchy preacher guy? And he says, I don't know. Legitimately. He was beating me up. I blacked out. And the next thing I knew, he was paced.
Yep.
So, like, Billy being honest, which doesn't happen very often, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know you last week had speculated that Huey's mom, which we're going to get to that subplot here shortly, may have been a imaginary or sub-creation of whatever the after effects of the V are.
Right, the hallucinations.
Right. Whereas this week we did not see any of Billy's wife, but we did see Joe/Negan reappear.
Right.
So I went back and I watched episode 1 with April, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I was looking for is if that character was physically interacting with other objects.
Right. Now,
I don't mean just sitting in a chair. I don't mean whatever, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, like, he picks something up. He opens something. He closes something. Right. And in that first appearance, Homelander goes and gets him a cup of coffee.
And pours the booze in it.
But Joe Negan never touches the cup.
Okay.
In this episode, he opens and closes a door on a car. I still say jury's out.
I agree, because I think the swerve is going to be that they're trying to make us think because here's the other thing that didn't pop. You know how we talk about the show, so if something pops into my mind later, we've already reviewed that show. If Negan isn't real, who got Butcher all the drugs to put in the cookies for Homelander's kid?
Yes.
So that's the thing that I'm like, I'm doing it, and I'm thinking maybe, like I said, the mother could be something too, but maybe not a hallucination, maybe a shapeshifter or somebody kind of trying to control Huey's mind, if that makes any sense. But I'm with you. I honestly think Negan is here now, because they even say at the end of the episode, and we'll get to it, is when they have the one person and Butcher's talking to him, he looks up and Butcher looks over and the guy looks over, and they're trying to say he looks confused because Negan shouldn't be there, but I think he's looking directly at Negan, and that's, I don't know. I think he's real now, but like you, they keep making me switch teams on that.
Yeah. And again, of course, we get the bit where we learn that the guy who invented or was working on the virus that can kill the Soups, Samir, is the father of Victoria's son.
Daughter.
And was that? Or daughter. Yes.
Yes.
My apologies. Daughter. And we get the bit where we're led to believe that he's dead because all they find left of him is a boot.
Yeah, the foot, a leg, or whatever.
Right. But then it's later revealed that Butcher cut the foot off and kidnapped the rest of them to try to get him to make some more V. Or the virus.
The virus. The V stands for virus there. Yes. And I will say this. You know how I talk about all the cape work that Homelander does, and it's magnificent? It distracts me from how awesome the Butcher Slither is. Do you know what I'm talking about, the Butcher Slither? Where he walks at you and the shoulders, one dips, and he kind of like moves his body, and he has that diabolical, as he says, look, and then the smile. It's so cool. Go back and watch that episode, and you will, because you're going to watch some with April. For the walk, when he's being cocky and talking to somebody and just belittling them, he does this super cool slither that I love. What? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about.
So, just such good acting in all of this, as stupid as it is, for a showboat thing. But I will say the bunny, I do like the bunny because it gets into the water supply and all the animals, and it's absolutely hysterical how crazy it gets with the sheep, and they think the bull. But the touching moment where Kimiko sees Butcher release the rabbit, and she smiles, because maybe she's like, because everybody's calling Butcher a monster. And he has a bit of humanity, and then he stomps the bunny out because it has superpowers, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of odd, but
well, no. So my thought process is,
right.
So he sees the bunny in pain, and then whatever that is that bursts out of the bunny, that's like those tentacle-looking things,
right?
Butcher maybe thinks that those are the same things that's inside him.
Right. That's kind of in Victoria's daughter too.
That's in Victoria's daughter as well, and that's why he puts the bunny out of his misery, kind of in a way, maybe foreshadowing that when the time comes for him, that Kamiko, obviously he's not thinking this, but we as the viewers sees this, that Kamiko is the one that has to put Butcher down when he becomes the tentacle monster.
I think somebody else is going to put him down, but that has powers.
Okay. So. Not a ton of Homelander in this episode. We got a ton of Homelander last week.
Right.
But this week essentially is Homelander comes. He says that he recently learned some stuff, and he feels as though he's been manipulating his son, and he's going to allow his son to make his own decisions and do whatever he wants. And he asks his son what he wants to do, and Ryan says, I want to help people. And they see the producer guy who does all the propaganda stuff for the Vought Boys 7 things.
The director.
What was that?
The director, the Zack Snyder of The Boys.
Okay.
That's what he is, man. He's the director who did the 7 movie.
Yes. Being a little inappropriate with a page or an underling or whatever it is. And Homelander's like, why don't you go help her? And it's Ryan's first day on the job and helping people. And luckily, he's got the best teacher in the world there to teach him how to help people.
Yep.
And that's Homelander. And Todd, I have a feeling that Homelander hasn't learned a thing.
What? I was just going to say, obviously, I will admit, the bit where like he goes home and he, does the stuff at the lab. And I know he hasn't changed. I've watched the show for 4 seasons now, Joe. But when he's like, what do you want to do? I want to do good. And you're like, yeah, he's trying to help the kid, but in the Homelander way. So it goes badly, and he does it, and the kid likes it too much. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, immediately, and you're like, oh, he's following after his dad. This is not good. So I'm like, oh. But in that, we get that we have to look for who's the spy amongst them, because they're still looking for it. You know what I mean?
Right. And this is all going on during the Vought D23 event.
Yes.
Where they're announcing, and Todd, I could spend a lean 40 minutes going on the phases 7 through 19 of the upcoming Vought and Vought related projects that appear on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
But even I had to cut myself off and say, no, this is too far.
Joe, when they did that joke about the phases, I cracked up so hard. I thought that was a great little dig at like the Marvel phases that they always announce. And I like the fact that you call it like D23, but it was V53 was killing me, because that's when Vought Foundation was founded, when they start creating their Nazis, good stuff. And I was like, oh, this is so good. Such a great bit. And they were showing the bits of the movies, which were just cringy, awful, good. So fun,
Well, again, I'm still waiting for the Big Chief Apache film to get a full release.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had the people. Now, I didn't watch, what was the boys' kids show?
Gen V. Little Boys, it was.
Little Boys.
But Gen V, and those are all characters. Because when Homelander says, like, we're gonna, because later on he goes, we're gonna lull them into false sense of security, and then we're gonna rise up like the gods that we are. And whoever the guy was from the the Vought news show. He gets, a sacrificial lamb.
Right.
Ashley.
Because Ashley, he and Ashley have been having and listen, this is late in the show. These are words that are used. They have a sub-dom relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's kind of found out amongst everyone that Ashley has no real power other than being a figurehead amongst everything.
Right.
He says, I want a dom with some actual power. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the news guy, ends up getting framed for the leak that A-Train did of releasing information to the boys, and they kind of just beat him bloody to a pulp. A-Train doesn't, though. And Homelander specifically tells A-Train to do it. And this is the second time this season that Homelander has given A-Train a direct order to destroy someone physically, and A-Train has not done it. And everybody else has been very eager and willing to do so.
Do you think the third time is going to go well?
I'm surprised we made it to 2.
Well, he never saw the first one. Because when he gave them the bats to kill Todd, Big Energy Todd, he said, do this, and he left. And Deep and Noir did it, and he didn't. So I don't know if he knows about it or not, but this is the first time he's seeing it not happen.
Mm-hmm.
But the 3 characters, so you can get caught up. It's not spoilers because it was in Gen V. The woman has preacher-like powers. If she touches you, you'll do what she says. The other kid is absolutely crazy because he was in the vault where they were creating the virus, and he was constantly being tested on. So his brain is broke and he has hallucinations, but he's super invulnerable and strong. And then the guy who looks like the Shade from comics is Tech Knight, and he's their Batman. He's kind of he's the world's greatest detective. From his senses, he can tell if you're lying, but he has one downfall. He likes holes in anything, like in the ground, in a tree. And I'm not going to say any more if you get my
Gotcha.
Point. So that's that's how somebody blackmails him. Like, we know your predilection, so you're gonna leave us alone. So that may be how they take him down later. But those are the 3 that have kind of joined the 7 behind the scenes, if you will. I just want to get you caught up in case you were interested,
Gotcha. I know. So I'm guessing he may not be the first Tech Knight, because when we get into the Huey story, and his dad is coming too, and he's telling the story about taking young Huey to get a Tech Knight doll. And he calls it an action figure, but it's really a doll.
Right. But that's because Homelander's been around for a long time too. So yeah. I don't know. It could be different Tech Knights.
Yeah, but Tech Knight is very figured in to phases 7 through 19, so hopefully nothing bad happens to him that would publicly embarrass him,
Right. So the last, and one last thing that I just want to throw is, doesn't Frenchie throw himself under the bus?
Right, so we got 2 more things. Frenchie, of course, is dealing with the pain of what he did and what he caused and what his life has become, and he surrenders himself to the police.
As a murderer.
Yes, and
go
ahead.
That's going to go well, but go ahead.
And as they are returning Stan Edgar back to custody, because the deal was, you get the pardon if we get the virus. We don't get the virus, you're going back to jail. Victoria ends up head popping the guy that's driving him, so I think she's going to get him back. Victoria is going to get Stan back into her good graces through that.
Yes.
And I'm sure they won't betray each other at least 6 more times before the season is over.
No, not at all.
But now, last but not least, is the Huey stuff with his mom and with his dad. So we were sitting here wondering what was going to happen. Like, how did the Compound V get in there if he did not do it? And it turns out that it fell out of his coat, which I don't think we saw it fall out of his coat.
There's something up there, but yeah, I'm with you.
Okay, I think the mom grabbed it out of the coat.
And she says, "Oh, I thought you wanted to do it, so I did."
Right. And, you know, the dad comes back. And again, I say the dad. It's Huey Sr. It's Simon Pegg. It is what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's happy, and we're happy. But also we as watchers, and Huey, who has seen this before, knows something could happen. Something bad could happen here with all of this, right?
He's going to get powers. That's what V does.
Yeah. And he does. Well, he starts to have some drifts in his memory a little bit. Like, he doesn't recognize Huey at one point, or maybe whatever happens, and he forgot that he just said that.
Right.
He's talking about all the things that he wants to go do. He wants to go to Branson. He wants to go to Pigeon Forge, and he wants to go to Paris. Three very similar travel destinations.
Right, but in Paris he wants to do, what tour was it? The Tom Hanks movie?
The Da Vinci Code tour.
Yeah, they have a Da Vinci Code tour. So
the mom and Huey leave the room, and they come back, and the dad is gone. Now, my immediate thought was, he's still there, and maybe the power that he got was that he turned invisible.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of sort of right. He becomes intangible?
He becomes Kitty Pryde.
Yeah. But he's still very confused, and he's just coming back from having a stroke. So unintentionally, he causes a lot of very graphic carnage throughout the hospital.
Which didn't bother me somehow, because I think it was very Looney Tunes-esque meets whatever horrible movie you probably watched in your life. But yeah.
I was worried that the scene where the patient was hitting on the nurse.
Oh, God.
And then Huey's dad shows up and then tries to sprint away, but he's only half phased through the guy. And everything's just going everywhere.
Yep.
And
that didn't bother me as much as him holding the super realistic human heart.
Right.
That one had me. I was like, avert your eyes, Todd. Like, because they are lingering on that human heart, man. Ugh.
So they finally get Huey's dad calmed down. He's no longer confused. Huey knows how to handle this sort of thing. He finds the right mix of painkillers through a French guy that he knows.
Mm-hmm.
And then he hooks him up to the IV, hides him from, because like now the hospital's on full lockdown. The police are there. Huey and the mom have hidden him. Huey puts him on the IV, puts the drugs in him. And then Huey, after going through all of this, has to be the one to put his dad to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a gut-wrenching, soul-crushing, everything bit of business throughout the course of this entire episode.
Because they do it earlier in the episode when he finally confronts his father, before they realize the damage to his brain is there and he could go off and do terrible things at any point. He goes, "Why did you pick Mom?" And he goes, "Do you remember our dog, Jar Jar?" And I found it funny that the dog's name was Jar Jar Joe. Mm-hmm. And he ends up saying, like, remember, no matter what, he had chronic, explosive diarrhea, but you wouldn't do it. I didn't want to be Jar Jar. And in a stupid, the dialogue's ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like talking about your living will and stuff like that. And you're using Jar Jar, the dog of diarrhea, kind of whatever. And but then when it comes around and he's like, "I'm not going to let you be Jar Jar," and he does it. And they have the touching talk about Branson and going to Paris for the Da Vinci Code tour. And I shouldn't be surprised that Simon Pegg had it in him, because he did a tour de force in World's End, the second best of the Coronado trilogies. Where he's losing it at the end of the movie. I forgot how good Simon Pegg could be as an actor, because he's playing a very one-dimensional character in this, but his death scene broke me up as I was watching it. Absolutely broke me up, and I thought it was brilliant and wonderful, and a very touching scene in a show about cannibalistic sheep.
Yep, and that's what this show is, right?
Mm-hmm. Pretty much.
Just a goofing around show with silly bits, and then every once in a while, you know, obviously there's a very strong overarching subplot. More recently, but especially so far this season, with fathers and sons and parents and children and so forth. And I think this is another one where we only got 3 more episodes left this season as well, right?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. So I just feel as though they got to cram a lot into 3 episodes.
I don't know. I feel like we definitely have one more season, so I figure we don't have to cram too much. We just have to set up for the taking it home season. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because what's that Alan Kripke guy who did this show?
Yeah.
This was originally always supposed to be 4 seasons, and then as the 4th season was being made, I have a feeling they might have brought that gold wheelbarrow full of money up to his house and said, how about a 5th season?
See, I'm different. I thought it was always supposed to be 5 seasons.
No, the rumor and innuendo was that it was always supposed to be 4, and then like midway through 4 filming, they decided that we're going to do 5.
Okay, because I completely remember different. I thought the rumor was that it was always going to be 5, and then here now in the 4th season, as it's playing out, the rumor was that it was going to get a 6th season.
Okay, so you might be correct in that then, because I knew it was supposed to go X, but they're going Y.
Right, because it was for a point that they said it was going to go 5, and then everybody's like, "Oh, Kripke said that Amazon asked him for a 6." And that was the scuttlebutt. And then it came back. He's like, no, I'm not doing 5. Because I had a talk with Beckie. He did Supernatural. And he wanted to walk after 5 seasons because he had a plan. And CW was like, no, this is our biggest show ever. And he walked away. I honestly think he wouldn't do that with the boys now. Like, I'm never going to say somebody is going to take the big bag full of cash. But I think it's 5 and done.
So again, a lot of it. So there's Kripke has a tweet out with a picture of the script from February. It says season 5 will be the final season. Always my plan. I just had to be cagey till I got the final okay.
Okay.
And he says final okay from Vought. Haha. But I guess it was one of those things where we were always led to believe that it was only supposed to be 4. He had to keep it under wraps that it was actually, yeah.
Okay. Like I said, I don't follow every little bit, but that sounds about right.
Yeah. And it was just like the page is from their shooting script from February, where most of it is redacted. And then it just says fade back in on, and then there's a bunch of reacted stuff. Then it says fade out. See you in our final season.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the next 3 episodes on this. I've been enjoying it
for sure,
and I've had a Carvel Fudgy the Whale every time I watch it now.
Oh goodness! Now I'm sad because I missed out, and again, my store ran out of them. But they did a gimmick over Father's Day that if you bought a Fudgy the Whale cake during Father's Day, you also got 4 Fudgy the Whale cake pops, like little mini Fudgy the Whales on a stick.
Oh. See, I thought they were running, especially if you bought a Fudgy the Whale for Father's Day, they welded you into a room and left you to die.
Let's hope not.
Right.
All right. So that's it, everyone. Thank you very much for hanging in there with us. It was a short-ish show. So for Todd, this is Joe saying thanks for listening to episode 717 of Longbox Heroes. And we will see you all here next week.
Remember, be a faucet, not a drain.
The Rob is a Longbox hero. The Rob is a Longbox hero. He gives us five stars.
You're listening to the soon-to-be-named network, the Lamborghini of podcast networks.